The worst part was not that Claire Whitmore shouted. It was that Ethan Walker's daughter heard every word. The glass testing room on the 42nd floor of Whitmore Aero Systems had been designed to make important people feel safe while expensive machines proved themselves under pressure. White epoxy floors. Stainless steel rails. Observation windows thick enough to hold back a failed turbine. 7 investors stood behind the glass with coffee they had stopped drinking. 32 engineers lined the far wall in dark jackets and polished shoes, their badges hanging straight, their tablets held like shields. In the center of the room sat Project Atlas, a 12-foot autonomous rescue aircraft module mounted inside a steel test cradle, its carbon fiber frame shining under blue laboratory lights. $50 million of contracts, reputation, and expectation rested inside that machine. Ethan Walker was not supposed to be touching it. He stood beside the open access panel in a faded gray work shirt with his maintenance badge clipped to his pocket and a small insulated tool pouch resting near his left boot. There was grease beneath one fingernail that no sink in the building had ever fully removed. His hands were steady. That was what made Marcus Hale notice first. Men who were caught doing something wrong usually moved too quickly or too slowly. Ethan moved like a man finishing what he had already decided was necessary. Marcus stepped forward, his face tightening before his voice did. "What are you doing?" Ethan did not turn right away. He adjusted a narrow logic bridge no longer than a thumb, checked the load monitor once, then closed his fingers around the edge of the panel. The room changed temperature without the air changing at all. Claire Whitmore was crossing the floor before anyone had time to explain. She was 39, dressed in a charcoal suit with a white blouse and the hard calm of a woman who had trained herself not to waste emotion where authority would do. But calm left her when she saw Ethan's hand inside the Atlas housing. "Step away from that prototype." Her voice struck the glass so cleanly that Lily Walker lifted her head in the visitors' waiting area beyond the partition. She was 6 years old, small for her age, wearing a navy cardigan over a school dress because Ethan had picked her up early when the sitter cancelled. In her lap was a white toy airplane with one wing repaired by tape. She pressed it against her chest and looked through the glass at her father. Ethan stepped back. He did not raise both hands. He did not pretend innocence. He simply stood still. Marcus arrived at Claire's shoulder with the speed of a man who had been waiting for permission to be offended. He bypassed clearance, Marcus said. He opened Atlas without authorization. Claire looked at Ethan's badge, then at his shirt, then at the open panel as if each detail confirmed the same insult. "You are maintenance," she said, each word quieter than the last and worse because of it. "Do you understand what you just touched?" No one spoke. An investor lowered his coffee cup. A junior engineer near the back glanced at the load screen and then away. Ethan looked past Claire for half a second, not toward the executives, not toward Marcus, but toward Lily. Her fingers were white around the little airplane. That was the only thing in the room that hurt him. "Yes," Ethan said. Claire's expression sharpened. "Then explain to me why a man hired to keep doors working decided to interfere with a $50 million flight system 6 minutes before the most important demonstration this company has ever run." Ethan heard the hum beneath the prototype, that slight uneven pulse still hiding inside the cradle, quieter now but not gone. He heard the coolant pump cycle. He heard the vibration settle against the floor through the soles of his boots. Machines had always told the truth if a person was patient enough to listen. People were harder. Marcus leaned closer, lowering his voice just enough to sound professional for the investors. "Security should remove him before he creates a bigger problem." Claire did not look away from Ethan. Behind the glass, Lily slid off her chair but stopped when her father gave the smallest shake of his head. "Stay there." She understood. She had learned young that some rooms were not made kinder by a child entering them. Ethan swallowed once. Not from fear. From calculation. Every second spent defending himself was a second Atlas moved closer to the test sequence. Every second Marcus kept talking was another second the wrong people controlled the story. Claire turned toward the security officer by the door. "Escort Mr. Walker out." The officer took one step. Ethan finally looked at the main load display. 81% on the pre-cycle. Climbing. He spoke before the officer reached him, his voice low enough that the room had to quiet itself to hear. "Run it at 87% before you remove me." Claire froze, not because she believed him, but because numbers spoken that calmly have a way of entering a room differently than excuses. Marcus's face lost color in a place only Ethan seemed to notice. The prototype hummed again. A thin circle appeared in the water inside Claire's untouched glass on the table. Lily saw it too. And for the first time that morning, the room stopped looking at Ethan like a janitor who had crossed a line and started looking at the machine like it might be the one hiding something. 9 minutes later, no one in the glass testing room was standing the way they had been standing before. The investors were no longer arranged in a neat row behind the observation glass. The engineers were no longer pretending to check their tablets. Claire Whitmore had one hand on the edge of the stainless steel table, not gripping it, not exactly, but resting there with enough pressure to leave the tips of her fingers pale. On the main display above Project Atlas, 3 words glowed in clean green letters. Load 104%. Stable. The machine that should have embarrassed her company in front of everyone who mattered was running beyond the threshold Marcus Hale had sworn it would never reach, and it was doing so with the calm, even hum of something that had finally stopped fighting itself. Ethan Walker stood 6 feet from the security officer who had been told to remove him. The officer had stopped moving after 87%. Everyone had. It had happened quietly at first, which somehow made it worse for the people who had dismissed him. The pre-cycle climbed from 81 to 83. The vibration in the floor deepened. Marcus said it was normal harmonic response. Ethan said nothing. At 85, the water in Claire's glass began to tremble in rings so thin they looked almost imagined. A junior engineer named Grace Miller looked up from her tablet, her expression changing before she had permission to speak. At 86, one of the stabilizer arms inside the Atlas cradle made a soft correcting motion, then another, then a third, each one a fraction late. Claire saw it. She did not understand it yet, but she saw it. At 87%, the warning strip flashed amber across the load monitor. Not red. Not catastrophic. Just amber, brief and precise, like the machine clearing its throat before telling the room the truth. Marcus reached for the console. "That is a sensor artifact," he said. Ethan's eyes stayed on the display. "No, it is not." Claire turned on him so sharply that her earrings moved against her jaw. "You do not get to speak right now." Ethan accepted that without flinching. Then Grace Miller spoke from the back of the room, small voice, careful words. "The lateral correction loop is lagging by 0.8 seconds. Marcus looked at her. That was all. Just a look. But Grace stopped breathing for half a second and still kept her eyes on the data. Claire heard the silence around that look. She had spent 15 years reading boardrooms, negotiations, hostile questions, false confidence. She knew when a subordinate feared being wrong. She also knew when a subordinate feared being right. "Continue the test," Claire said. Marcus blinked. "Claire, I strongly recommend we pause and recalibrate. You told me 2 minutes ago there was no issue. There is not an issue. I am saying, given unauthorized interference, we should protect the integrity of the demonstration." Ethan looked at him then, and for the first time all morning there was something in his face colder than patience. Not anger. Recognition. Claire caught it. She looked from Ethan to Marcus, then to the prototype. "Continue." The number climbed. 88. 90. 93. The amber line flickered again, then vanished as the small bridge Ethan had adjusted took over the signal route. The stabilizer arms corrected together this time, smooth and simultaneous. The hum changed. It was not louder. It was cleaner. Every engineer in the room heard it, even the ones who did not want to. Grace's tablet recalculated the error rate. Her mouth parted slightly. Deviation is dropping, she said. 0.2. 0.1. It is correcting. By 98%, the water in Claire's glass had gone still. By 100%, Project Atlas held its position inside the cradle as if it had been pinned there by gravity itself. By 104%, the investors were leaning toward the glass like people watching a verdict being read. No one cheered. That would have been easier. Applause would have given everyone somewhere to put to shame. Instead, the room stayed quiet, the kind of quiet that arrives when a fact becomes too large to ignore. Claire looked at the green display, then at the open panel, then at Ethan's hands. Grease under the nails. A small scrape along one knuckle. The hands of a man she had ordered out because his shirt did not match the room. Behind the glass, Lily stood with her white toy airplane held against her chest, watching all of them watch her father differently. Marcus took half a step back. It was not much. It was enough. Claire noticed. Ethan noticed. Grace noticed. The machine had passed. The lie had not. Claire Whitmore had built her entire morning around the belief that Project Atlas would make doubt expensive. The demonstration was supposed to last 11 minutes, beginning with a controlled lift simulation, moving into crosswind correction, and ending with an emergency descent sequence that would show the investors exactly why Whitmore Aero Systems deserved the $50 million contract sitting and signed in a black leather folder on the observation table. Atlas was not a toy aircraft or a luxury prototype built for headlines. It was a rescue stabilizer designed for autonomous medical drones that could carry emergency supplies into flood zones, mountain roads, hurricane corridors, and rural places where a ground ambulance could lose the only hour that mattered. Claire had said that sentence so many times in private meetings that it had become part of her posture. We are not selling speed. We are selling minutes people do not have. Her father had founded the company with farm equipment sensors and a rented warehouse outside Dayton, Ohio. Claire had taken over after his stroke and spent 6 years dragging Whitmore Aero from respectable supplier to national contender. There were board members who still called her ambitious as if ambition were a flaw when it came from her and a virtue when it came from the men who had doubted her. Project Atlas was supposed to end that conversation. It was supposed to prove that she could take her father's company further than he ever imagined, into aviation, emergency logistics, and federal contracts large enough to change the weight of the name Whitmore. That was why the 42nd floor had been sealed since dawn. That was why the carpet outside the testing suite had been vacuumed in 2 directions. That was why the coffee service came from a hotel 4 blocks away instead of the cafeteria downstairs. Every surface had been prepared to communicate control. Every person in the room had been chosen to protect the impression of competence. On the west side of the observation area, a scale model of an autonomous rescue aircraft hung from 2 clear cables, its white wings painted with the Whitmore blue stripe. Lily had noticed it before anyone noticed her. She had pointed at it softly and told Ethan it looked like the one her mother had drawn on a napkin once, except cleaner. Ethan had looked up at the model for only a second. Then he had checked the time and adjusted the strap on Lily's backpack. He had not known then that within the hour his name would be spoken on that floor with suspicion, contempt, and then a kind of silence no one had rehearsed. The investors did not arrive all at once. They came in pairs, carrying phones, polished smiles, and the careful boredom of people used to being impressed for money. Claire greeted them by name. Marcus Hale stood near the prototype with his tablet tucked under one arm, answering technical questions in a voice smooth enough to make uncertainty sound amateur. He explained the dual-axis correction system. He explained the adaptive load response. He explained that Atlas had passed 142 internal simulations without a critical deviation. He did not mention the missing warning logs. He did not mention the amber flicker that had appeared during a late-night test 2 weeks earlier. He did not mention the maintenance technician who had paused in the hallway at 6:15 that morning because a machine behind a closed door sounded wrong. Claire trusted Marcus because she had paid him to be trustable. His resume had the right universities, the right aerospace firms, the right patents attached to his name in neat legal language. Ethan Walker had none of that visible on his badge. His badge said Facilities Maintenance. His work order said replace a faulty access sensor near testing suite 4. His lunch was in a paper bag inside a locker 3 floors down. His daughter was coloring quietly in a visitor chair because the school nurse had called about a stomachache that turned out to be nerves before a spelling quiz. Nothing about him belonged in the story Claire thought she was telling that morning. That was the danger of rooms built too carefully. They made powerful people forget that truth did not care who had been invited. Ethan Walker was 34 years old, and most people at Whitmore Aero Systems knew him only by the small things he fixed after they had stopped noticing them. A conference room door that dragged against the frame. A flickering light above the accounting hallway. A loading dock sensor that froze every time the temperature dropped below 20 degrees. He moved through the building before sunrise and after most people had gone home, carrying a canvas tool bag, a ring of keys, and the quiet habit of leaving every place slightly better than he found it. Nobody stopped him in the hall unless something was broken. Nobody asked what he had done before. That suited Ethan better than it should have. Questions had a way of opening rooms he had spent years keeping closed. He had not always worn a maintenance badge. 11. Years earlier, he had graduated from Purdue with a degree in aerospace systems engineering and the kind of recommendations professors write when they believe a young man will build something that lasts. He had been precise, patient, almost irritatingly calm in lab reviews, the student who stayed after everyone else left because a vibration reading bothered him by a fraction no one else thought mattered. His first job had been at Northline Dynamics, a contractor in Indianapolis that designed guidance components for emergency response drones. He had loved the work in the clean, private way some people love music. Not because it sounded impressive at parties, but because the math became metal, the metal became movement, and movement, when done right, could carry help to someone waiting in the dark. Then came the validation report. A senior team lead had pushed a system through testing with numbers Ethan could not verify. Ethan refused to sign his name beneath data that felt too clean. 2 weeks later, when a demonstration failed in front of a regional buyer, the explanation moved through the company faster than the truth could defend itself. Ethan Walker had missed a design flaw. Ethan Walker had delayed review. Ethan Walker was difficult under pressure. None of it was exactly written in one place. It did not need to be. A reputation can be ruined by tone alone if enough important people repeat it carefully. He left with one cardboard box, no lawsuit, no public argument, and a wife who met him in the parking lot with their baby daughter asleep against her shoulder. Emily had not asked whether he was all right. She knew better. She had simply handed him the diaper bag, kissed Lily's forehead, and said they would figure out Tuesday after they got through Monday. They did, for a while. Ethan took contract work. Emily taught second grade. Lily learned to walk by holding the edge of an old drafting table Ethan had bought at a garage sale. Then Emily got sick in a way that started quietly and became expensive before either of them understood what kind of year they were living inside. There were hospital corridors, insurance calls, midnight drives, bills folded into drawers, and mornings when Ethan changed Lily's socks in the car before preschool because he had slept in a chair and forgotten where he had packed the clean ones. Emily passed away 2 years before the morning on the 42nd floor. After that, Ethan stopped thinking about careers in the way ambitious men think about them. He thought about rent, groceries, health coverage, school pickups, shoes that fit. A job at Whitmore Aero opened through a maintenance contractor that did not care why an aerospace engineer wanted to replace filters and repair access panels as long as he passed the background check and showed up on time. Ethan showed up early. He never corrected engineers when they explained simple machines to him. He never mentioned that he understood the systems behind the walls better than half the people presenting slides above them. Pride was a luxury. Lily was not. On the morning of the demonstration, she sat behind the glass with her white toy airplane because the school nurse had called and Ethan had no one else. She colored quietly while her father worked near testing suite 4, unaware that the hum coming through the wall had already reached the part of him that never stopped listening. Ethan first heard the problem through the wall while kneeling beside an access panel with a screwdriver in his right hand and Lily's backpack resting near his boot. It was not loud. It was not dramatic. No alarm sounded, no engineer shouted, no red light swept across the hallway. It was only a thin, uneven pulse under the clean mechanical hum of Project Atlas, a half-beat hesitation that arrived every few seconds and then hid again beneath the cooling fans. Most people would have called it normal equipment noise. Most people had not spent half their lives listening to machines confess what their screens had not yet admitted. Ethan stopped turning the screw. Lily looked up from the folded worksheet she had been coloring on the floor beside the wall. "Dad?" she asked softly. He held up one finger, not to quiet her in a harsh way, only to ask for 1 second. The sound came again. The stabilizer simulator behind the wall cycled through a low-load pre-test, probably. No more than 70%, maybe 72. The hum rose, smoothed, then shivered at the edge. Ethan placed his palm flat against the painted wall. Through the drywall, insulation, conduit, and steel framing, he felt the smallest flutter return through the structure. Not random. Patterned. Lily watched him the way children watch parents when they know something has changed before anyone has explained it. "Is it supposed to sound like that?" Ethan did not answer immediately. He stood, gathered his tools, and walked 6 feet down the hallway to the maintenance terminal mounted beside testing suite 4. The terminal was not connected to protected engineering files, but it showed environmental load, power draw, cooling demand, and vibration tolerances for the room. Enough for maintenance. Not enough for design. Usually. Ethan tapped the screen twice and brought up the live mechanical readout. The numbers were clean in the way numbers become clean when they have been averaged too politely. Floor vibration within acceptable range. Cooling pressure within acceptable range. Servo response within acceptable range. He looked past the summary and opened the raw feed. That was where the machine stopped being polite. The lateral correction cycle lagged by a fraction each time the simulated load increased, then overcorrected on the next response. Tiny. Less than a second. Easy to dismiss if a person wanted the demonstration to be on schedule. Impossible to ignore if a person understood what would happen when a rescue aircraft met crosswind above a flooded highway or between 2 hospital buildings. Ethan leaned closer. The number appeared again, buried in a secondary column most executives would never see. 87%. Not failure. Not yet. A threshold. Below it, Atlas could pretend. Above it, the feedback loop would begin feeding its own error back into the stabilizer until the aircraft corrected against a correction it had already made. Ethan felt something old and cold move through him. He had seen this kind of mistake before, not the same system, not the same company, but the same human shape around the error. A warning too small for powerful people. A schedule too expensive to move. A machine asked to carry the truth after people had refused to. Behind him, Lily stood and picked up her white toy airplane. Its taped wing bent slightly where her thumb pressed it. "Dad, is the airplane sick?" Ethan looked at her, and for a moment the hallway disappeared. He saw Emily in a hospital room 2 years earlier, smiling with more courage than strength, telling Lily that airplanes were just promises with wings. He blinked once and returned to the screen. "It is confused," he said. "That is different." He took a photo of the raw feed with his phone, not because he planned to use it against anyone, but because men like Marcus Hale liked problems less when they arrived without proof. Then he opened the limited schematic attached to the maintenance portal. It was only a room-level diagram, but Atlas appeared in simplified layers: power, cooling, sensor routing, safety relay. Ethan stared at the feedback path for 3 seconds, then 10. There. A logic bridge between the auxiliary stabilizer loop and the primary correction channel had been routed as if the delay compensation happened upstream. It did not. Not under live load. Not at 87%. Ethan exhaled slowly. Somewhere inside testing suite 4, people were preparing coffee, contracts, and confidence. 6 minutes from now, they would ask Atlas to prove them right. Ethan already knew it would tell the truth instead. Ethan found Marcus Hale near the threshold of testing suite 4, standing beneath the blue light of the access scanner with a tablet in one hand and a smile prepared for people more important than Ethan. The smile did not survive the first sentence. "There is a load instability in the lateral correction loop," Ethan said. He kept his voice low because the investors were only 20 feet away beyond the glass, and because panic never made a true thing more useful. Marcus looked at Ethan's maintenance badge, then at the phone in Ethan's hand, then at Lily standing beside the wall with her white toy airplane pressed to her sweater. "Excuse me." Ethan turned the phone so Marcus could see the raw feed. "It shows up at 87%. The auxiliary stabilizer is lagging and correcting late. If you run full sequence, Atlas will start fighting its own feedback." Marcus did not take the phone. He only looked at the screen long enough for his eyes to catch the number. That was the moment Ethan understood Marcus had seen it before. It was not surprise that crossed the head engineer's face. It was recognition, fast and unwelcome, covered almost immediately by offense. "That is maintenance telemetry," Marcus said. "Room vibration data, power draw, environmental noise. You are not qualified to interpret architecture from a facilities terminal." Ethan lowered the phone. "The bridge is routed downstream of the delay compensation." Marcus's jaw tightened so slightly that anyone else might have missed it. "You do not know what you are talking about." "I know enough to know the warning will not hold under live load." Marcus stepped closer, not loudly, not dramatically, but with the quiet territorial confidence of a man used to rooms rearranging themselves around his title. "Listen carefully, Mr. Walker. Your job is to replace sensors, tighten panels, and call engineering when a light turns red. Your job is not to wander into restricted systems and invent problems 6 minutes before a demonstration." Ethan looked through the glass at Project Atlas. The cradle lights pulsed in a slow blue sequence. Engineers moved around it with the calm of people performing confidence for an audience. "I am calling engineering now," he said. Marcus's face changed again, just for a second. There was anger in it, but underneath the anger was calculation. Ethan had seen the same expression years earlier at Northline Dynamics, when a project lead realized the quiet man in the corner had read the numbers too closely. Marcus glanced toward the investors, then toward Claire, who was speaking with an older board member near the observation table. His voice dropped. "Delete the photo." Ethan did not move. "No," Marcus smiled then, but there was no warmth in it. "You brought your daughter to a restricted demonstration floor because you could not manage your personal life, and now you are risking your employment over a screen you do not understand." Lily's eyes moved from Marcus to Ethan. Ethan did not look down. He could not afford to let Marcus see that the words had landed exactly where they were aimed. "Run a hold at 87%, Ethan said. "If I am wrong, I will leave the building before lunch." Marcus leaned in close enough that Ethan could smell the sharp mint on his breath. "If you touch Atlas again, I will make sure your daughter watches security walk you out of here, and I will make sure no contractor in this county hires you to change an air filter." Ethan's hand closed once around the phone, then relaxed. He did not answer threats with threats. Men like Marcus were always waiting for anger because anger was easy to document. Ethan gave him nothing. Marcus lifted his tablet and tapped 3 times. The access light beside the door shifted from blue to white, then to a hard red. Ethan's badge had just been suspended from the testing suite. Go back downstairs, Marcus said. Take the little girl with you. For a moment, only the low hum of Atlas filled the hallway. Lily stepped closer to Ethan's leg, silent now. Ethan looked at the red scanner, then at the glass beyond it. On Marcus's tablet, reflected faintly against the black surface, Ethan saw an email thread open for less than a second before Marcus swiped it away. Subject line, Atlas load warning, second notice. Sent 2 weeks earlier. Ethan did not need the whole message. The first line was enough. Marcus had known. He had known before the coffee service, before the investors, before Claire stood in front of the room with her father's company balanced on one demonstration. Marcus had known, and he had chosen the contract over the truth. Ethan put his phone into his pocket and looked at his daughter. Stay where I can see you, he said softly. Lily nodded, though her eyes were bright. Marcus turned away, already dismissing him. That was his mistake. He believed Ethan wanted to win an argument. Ethan only wanted the machine not to lie in the sky. Ethan had 3 clean choices, and none of them were good enough. He could obey Marcus, take Lily downstairs, clock out early, and pretend he had not seen the warning that everyone else had been paid too much to miss. He could call someone above Marcus and hope that a company built on titles would stop a $50 million demonstration because a maintenance technician said the machine sounded wrong. Or he could do the one thing that would make him look guilty before anyone understood why he had done it. He stood in the hallway outside testing Suite 4 while the access scanner glowed red beside him, listening to the countdown begin through the glass. 5 minutes to sequence. The announcement came from the overhead speakers in a calm female voice that made urgency sound elegant. Inside the testing room, Claire Whitmore was being handed the black leather folder by her assistant. Investors gathered closer to the observation window. Marcus moved with the smooth confidence of a man who believed the story had been contained. Ethan looked at Lily. She was sitting again now, because he had asked her to, but she had stopped coloring. The white toy airplane rested in both hands on her lap. One taped wing pointed down slightly. Ethan could see the crease between her eyebrows, the one she had inherited from Emily when she was trying to be brave without knowing what bravery was supposed to look like. He remembered Emily in the hospital, her voice thin but steady, telling him that doing the right thing was rarely dramatic when it started. Usually, she had said, it just felt like making yourself uncomfortable before someone else paid the price. Ethan closed his eyes for 1 second. When he opened them, Marcus was laughing softly at something one of the investors had said. That decided it. Ethan walked away from the main scanner, not toward the elevators, but toward the service corridor behind the environmental control room. Whitmore's building was new, expensive, and full of systems designed by people who assumed important doors were the only doors that mattered. Maintenance knew better. Every sealed floor still needed janitorial access. Every lab still needed filter changes. Every beautiful wall hid a practical route for the people who kept it beautiful. Ethan passed the supply closet, opened a narrow gray door marked mechanical chase, and stepped into the service passage that ran behind the testing suite. Lily did not follow. She watched him disappear and did exactly what he had asked. She stayed where he could see her through the angled glass reflection. The passage was warm from conduit heat and smelled faintly of dust, metal, and floor cleaner. Ethan moved without hurry. Hurry made noise. He reached the rear panel of testing Suite 4, where cleaning crews entered after hours to polish the epoxy floor and wipe fingerprints from the observation glass. His badge would not open the engineering door anymore. The cleaning relay was different. It cared about schedules, not status. Ethan removed the small insulated tool pouch from his belt, took out a flat maintenance key, and opened the relay box beneath the access pad. He did not bypass security. He did not break anything. He used the override every building kept for the people who had to enter when software forgot the world was physical. The light turned green. 4 minutes to sequence. Ethan stepped inside the rear of the testing room behind a bank of equipment cabinets. The sound of Atlas was stronger here, cleaner and more troubling at the same time. The machine was trying to stabilize against a mistake it had not fully reached yet. On the far side of the room, Marcus was facing the investors. Claire was watching the main display. No one looked toward the rear panel because no one expected truth to enter through a service door. Ethan crossed 12 feet of white floor, stopped at the open diagnostic station, and brought up the auxiliary bridge map. He did not need full administrative access to rewrite the system. He only needed to change the route the delayed correction signal would take when load crossed the threshold. The approved design sent it downstream. That was the flaw. Ethan rerouted it through the primary compensation channel and locked the bridge into a safe test mode that would show every change in the log. He wanted the record visible. He wanted the machine honest. 3 minutes to sequence. His hand moved once to the thin chain beneath his shirt, where Emily's wedding ring rested against his chest. He touched it through the fabric, then returned both hands to the console. The correction accepted. The amber risk marker dropped, not gone, but controlled. Ethan exhaled. That was when Claire saw him. Claire saw him from across the testing floor, and for one clean second she did not understand what she was seeing. Ethan Walker stood at the diagnostic station with the auxiliary bridge map open in front of him, one hand still near the console, his gray maintenance shirt stark against the white floor and blue laboratory light. The room had been built around hierarchy. Engineers near the machine. Investors behind glass. Executives at the observation table. Maintenance in the hall until something leaked, jammed, or failed. Ethan was in the wrong place inside that map of power, and Claire's mind reached for the explanation that required the least disruption to everything she believed about the morning. He had crossed a line. Step away from that prototype. Her voice carried across the suite and cut the countdown colder than any alarm could have. Conversation stopped in pieces. First the engineers. Then the investors behind the glass. Then Grace Miller, who had been checking a pre-sequence log near the rear workstation and now looked from Ethan's screen to Marcus Hale with an expression she tried to hide too late. Ethan removed his hand from the console and stepped back exactly one pace. He did not close the screen. That mattered. Marcus saw it and moved quickly. Security, he said, before Claire had to. He bypassed restricted access. The security officer by the main door straightened. Lily stood up behind the observation glass so fast her chair slid back without falling. Her white toy airplane was in both hands, held tight against her cardigan. Ethan saw her reflection in the glass and gave the smallest shake of his head. Not now. Stay there. Claire crossed the floor toward him, every step measured, every inch of her face controlled except her eyes. The investors were watching. Board members were watching. Her own engineers were watching. In 3 minutes, the demonstration that would decide the future of the company was supposed to begin, and a facilities employee had entered a sealed testing room after being denied access by the head of engineering. Claire did not need Marcus to supply outrage. The room had already handed it to her. Do you have any idea what you just did? She asked. Ethan looked at the display, then at her. Yes. The answer was too calm. It made Marcus angrier because calm did not fit the role he needed Ethan to play. He altered the auxiliary correction path, Marcus said. Without clearance, without review, without engineering authorization. That is direct interference with a live prototype. A soft sound moved through the observation area, not quite a gasp, not quite a whisper. $50 million can make a room imagine disaster very quickly. Claire's jaw tightened. Mr. Walker, you were told to leave this floor. I was told the warning did not exist. Marcus stepped forward. That is not what you were told. Ethan did not look at him. Ask him why the load warning email stopped 2 weeks ago. The room changed again. Not loudly. No one moved much. But Grace Miller's eyes dropped to her tablet, and Marcus noticed before Claire did. This is absurd, Marcus said. He is trying to cover a breach by inventing a conspiracy. Claire lifted one hand, and Marcus stopped speaking because he knew the gesture. She turned slightly toward Grace. What emails? Grace swallowed. She was 28, knew enough to still believe that data should matter more than politics, experienced enough to know that this belief could be expensive. There were automated flags from the late cycle load simulations, she said carefully. I saw references in the archive index yesterday, but the threads were locked. Marcus smiled without warmth. Because preliminary simulations are archived during demonstration week. Standard procedure. Ethan spoke softly. Not when the second notice says the same threshold twice. Claire turned back to him. You read internal engineering email? No, Ethan said. I saw the subject line on his tablet after he suspended my badge. That should have sounded weak. It did not. It sounded like a man refusing to add anything he could not prove. Claire looked at Marcus. Marcus looked offended, but offense was no longer enough. The overhead voice announced 2 minutes to sequence. Claire's empty champagne glass sat on the observation table, untouched, a thin ring of water beginning to tremble again. Lily saw it. Ethan saw it. Claire followed his eyes and saw it too. For the first time, her anger hesitated. Marcus filled the gap immediately. Claire, remove him now and we can still preserve the demonstration. Ethan looked at her, not pleading, not challenging, just present. Run it at 87% before you remove me. The same number again. Calm. Precise. Unwelcome. Claire stood between the man she had trusted and the man she had humiliated, with Project Atlas humming behind her like it was waiting for permission to tell the truth. Then she looked at Grace. Pull the logs. Grace Miller's fingers moved across the tablet with the careful speed of someone who understood that the next 30 seconds might decide what kind of company she worked for. No one told the investors to stay quiet. They simply did. Claire stood beside the observation table, her eyes fixed on Grace, while Marcus Hale stood 2 steps behind her with his tablet held against his side like it had suddenly become too heavy. Project Atlas continued to hum inside the cradle, blue status lights passing along its frame in a slow sequence. The overhead voice counted down to 1 minute, then stopped when Claire lifted her hand and said, "Hold sequence." That was the first real fracture in the morning Marcus had built. A held sequence had to be logged. A held sequence had to be explained. Grace opened the archived simulation index, then the locked threads, then the audit trail behind the lock. Her face changed before she spoke, and this time she did not look at Marcus for permission. There are 3 automated warnings, she said. First notice, 13 days ago. Second notice, 11 days ago. Final notice, 9 days ago. Claire's voice was very quiet. Threshold. Grace looked at Ethan, then back to the tablet. 87% load. The number entered the room for the 3rd time, and now it no longer sounded like a guess. It sounded like evidence. Marcus gave a short breath through his nose. Automated flags are not final findings. We get noise from simulation software all the time. Grace scrolled once more. The final notice was manually closed. Claire did not turn around. By whom? Grace read the line, and the room seemed to lean toward the answer. Marcus Hale. Marcus started to speak, but Claire raised one finger, and the sound died in his throat. Ethan stood near the diagnostic station with his hands at his sides. He did not look satisfied. That disappointed some people, though they would not have known how to say why. They expected triumph from a man proved right after being humiliated. Ethan had no use for triumph. The machine was still on the cradle. The system still needed to be tested. Lily watched from behind the glass, her white toy airplane pressed against her chest, her eyes moving between the adults as if she were trying to understand why truth took so long when the machine had said it from the beginning. Claire looked at the prototype, then at Ethan. "What did you change?" Ethan did not step forward until she nodded. Then he pointed to the auxiliary bridge map on the display. The delayed correction signal was routed downstream of compensation. At low load, it hides. At 87%, it starts correcting after the stabilizer has already adjusted, so the loop begins chasing its own mistake. I rerouted the signal through the primary compensation channel and locked the change in test mode. Nothing is hidden. It is all in the log. The engineers heard the difference between a man guessing and a man explaining work he had already understood before anyone asked. Claire heard it too. She looked at Marcus then, finally. Not with anger. Anger would have been warmer. This was assessment. "Run the hold test at 87%, she said. Marcus's mouth opened. "Claire. Not you." She turned to Grace. "You run it." Grace plugged her tablet into the console with hands that trembled only once. The load sequence restarted from 82%. 83. 84. The room went quiet enough to hear the cooling fans adjust. At 85, the water in Claire's glass formed a thin ring. At 86, the stabilizer. Arms hesitated, just as Ethan had said. At 87, Grace paused the sequence on the original archived model first. The amber warning flashed, and the lateral correction graph bent out of tolerance. A red advisory appeared across the screen. Potential instability under live load. No one spoke. Then Grace switched to the active test route Ethan had entered. Same threshold. Same load. Same cradle. This time the bridge caught the delayed signal before it could multiply the error. The amber line appeared for less than a second, then vanished. The stabilizer arms moved together, smooth as breath. 89. 93. 98. 100. 104. Stable. The green letters filled the display, but they did not make the room feel lighter. They made it feel honest. One investor slowly removed his glasses. A board member lowered his phone. Gray stared at the data as if data had finally defended someone who could not afford to defend himself. Marcus took half a step back, and the motion was small enough to miss unless the entire room had already stopped trusting him. Claire looked at Ethan's maintenance badge, then at the open schematic, then through the glass at the little girl holding the taped white airplane. The apology did not come yet. It would have been too small for the size of what had happened. Instead, Claire set both hands flat on the stainless steel table and bowed her head for 1 second, just long enough for everyone to understand that the most powerful woman in the room had finally seen the man she had almost thrown away.